Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
Who are we now? Redefining your identity as a couple after decades together. So it's been decades of doing life together, raising kids, building careers, caring for aging parents. It's no wonder your relationship might feel like it's been on autopilot. Beneath the surface of routine and responsibility, there's still something worthwhile waiting to be rediscovered. Today, we're talking about how to breathe life back into a long-term relationship and create a second marriage with the same person, one that's deeper, more emotionally connected, and aligned with who you are now. There is a myth that the two of you should have all figured out by now. But the truth is, who you were at 30 is not the same as who you are at 60. Just as you've evolved individually, your relationship needs to evolve too. The skills and patterns that helped you survive the frantic, too busy years might not work towards the emotional intimacy you're craving now and have more time for. Growing at this more mature stage isn't a sign of failure. It's the work of real love. Emotional intimacy becomes important because it's no longer about logistics and schedules. It's about feeling seen, known, and valued by the person you've chosen to share your life with. Without that, couples can slip into emotional loneliness, even while physically together. Rebuilding that sense of closeness requires intentional time, honest conversation, and an effort to be vulnerable. What kind of couple do you want to be in this new phase of life? What experiences do you still want to share? Without a shared vision, couples can end up living parallel lives. With one, you become teammates again, united not just by the past, but by your future. It's important to explore your values and dreams and how they've changed over time. So begin with curiosity instead of assuming there's nothing new to know. The Harvard study of adult development, one of the longest running studies of adult life, found that the quality of our strongest relationships is the strongest predictor of long-term happiness, health, and even longevity. Today's guest is passionate about this topic and has coined the term second marriage. Johanna Hurwitz, doctor, the clinical psychologist in private practice in New York City, where she works with adult individuals and couples navigating intimacy, identity, and connection. She's the founder of 5 Windows, a curated resource for couples in long-term monogamous relationships who want to create what she calls a second marriage with each other. Her focus is on helping partners grow together in this next chapter of life with authenticity, renewed connection, and pride in the legacy they've created together. With a background in resilience, attachment theory, and decades of clinical experience, Johanna brings both warmth and wisdom to couples who've built a life together and are now asking, what's next? Thanks so much for being here today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
So my first question is, what is the significance of 5 Windows?
Well, the name 5 Windows was inspired by a visit to the Jewish ghetto in Venice. And there I learned and saw that buildings with 5 windows marked synagogues. And they were very simple on the outside, but inside they were rich and ornate and deeply sacred. And I thought this was a really powerful metaphor for a long-term committed relationship. On the outside, it looks kind of ho-hum and normal and, nothing special. But inside, it's layered with history and complexity and devotion, and it's a sacred space. So, as you mentioned, that study, the Harvard study, really gives support to this idea that our long-term relationships, when they're working well, are so incredibly valuable and keep us healthy and living long. And that's really the heartbeat of Five Windows. It's about helping people in long-term committed relationships, often high-achieving individuals who've given so much to their families and careers and communities, turn their attention back to their relationship so that that's been carrying it all the whole time, so that they can celebrate it, not fix it, but tend to it and honor what they've built together.
I really like what you said about not fix it, but tend to it. And I think that that's part, it's like a garden that you want to keep working on and paying attention to. And when you're juggling so many other things, now you've got time in the second marriage half of life.
Exactly.
I like that a lot. Why do so many couples feel stuck once their children are grown and careers slow down?
Well, that's a really important question, and I want to answer it from a slightly different angle. I think that it's not that I see couples as being stuck. I don't want to pathologize where they find themselves. I see this more as a natural phase, a moment when the energy that went into everything else finally has some space to shift. And, for decades, the relationship often came last. It wasn't that urgent. It didn't get, the children to the doctor or the dog to the vet or have a deadline to meet. It didn't pay the bills. It didn't really demand any attention. And now with things winding down, they really don't, they just don't need that much attention. And it's just really it's a sign that you're ready for something new.
There's a lot of optimism in the way you're describing it, and I think that's important.
Yeah, optimism and celebration, I think, and pride.
What does it mean to create a second marriage with your current partner?
Well, a second marriage, first of all, it doesn't mean getting divorced and remarried, although if that's your path, no judgment. And it's not about religion or politics or morality or legal status, really. It's more about honoring the incredible resilience that it takes to get through decades of parenting, careers, caregiving, trauma, and all kinds of change that we go through as individuals. And it's about using the emotional and financial and psychological resources that you finally have to invest in this relationship, not because you have to, but because you want to. I often think of midlife as a kind of a latency period, to borrow from Freud's developmental theories, where the intense demands of sex and romance and identity quiet down a bit while we focus on external mastery of work and family and community. And now, Erik Erikson and his theories about the phases of psychosocial development, he called this phase of life generativity versus stagnation. And I don't see it as one or the other. I see it as both. That while we are, maybe the relationship is stagnating a little bit, is going into the background while we're producing. And now it's time for the focus to shift.
Yes. What are some signs that a couple is ready for this kind of transformation?
That's an important question because this kind of transformation isn't for everyone, and timing definitely matters. That even though they may have wondered what might have been if I had married someone else or gone in a different direction, they're still genuinely glad that they stayed. And they still enjoy each other's company, and the relationship might feel a bit disconnected or low energy, but the foundation is intact, and there's still, care and respect and hope that something is more possible. But it's also important to be honest about when a couple may not be ready. And this isn't the path for a couple in a so-called silent divorce. those couples living parallel lives with minimal emotional connection and no real curiosity about one another and no desire to rebuild. And I think that if one or both partners feel emotionally checked out or resentful of the other person to the point of indifference, then the work really needs to start elsewhere. And what I would recommend is something called discernment counseling for couples who are on the brink. And usually one couple is leaning into the relationship and one couple is leaning out of the relationship. And it's a short-term thing where at the end of the therapy, you've made a decision about whether you want to put your energy into the relationship or not.
Yes, I think that would be a really good idea, because you don't want to try to build on a fragile foundation. You want to sort that out first. That makes sense. So, what are some myths about long-term love that hold couples back from evolving?
There's so many powerful myths, and they're the ones that I think are the most relevant are ones that may be beautiful, but they were never really created for modern love. And first, you've got love as suffering, right? And this equates deep love with pain and loss or sacrifice. And it can unconsciously translate into tolerating disconnection or believing that joy or ease or playfulness somehow cheapens the depth of the bond and can make people feel guilty for being optimistic and wanting things that are good. On the flip side, you have myths that equate lasting relationships with love at first sight or unending passion. And when the dopamine-fueled intensity natural phases, the couples panic and assume that love is dying when in fact it's just beginning to deepen. You've got the soulmate myth, which Plato's Symposium gave us this idea that one person is supposed to complete you and be everything in your life. And it can lead partners, I think, to blame each other for what's missing from their lives rather than getting to know yourself better and figuring out who you are and what you want. Because paradoxically, developing your own interests can actually make your bond stronger. And now in this stage of life, you have the time to do both. And last but not least, there's the old workhorse of marriage as duty that comes from the medieval Christian ideals. And in this myth, marriage is a sacrifice and an obligation and even a kind of spiritual assignment. And this can keep couples in lifeless, dysfunctional relationships out of guilt and fear of failure, duty, and long-term love really evolves best when most people feel like they're making an active choice to grow together, not just fulfilling a role that they must do according to some higher power,
or should, or an obligation. It has to. I really agree. I think having that feeling of choice keeps things working, greased. It keeps the grease so the wheels keep turning as opposed to getting rusted shut, maybe.
Exactly. We like our freedom.
Yeah. What are the first steps a couple can take to create a more emotionally connected partnership, which I think is what people are looking for?
Yeah. Well, I think the first step is simple, but powerful, and it's really to reflect on what you've already built together. In long-term relationships, we so often focus on what's missing, but before jumping into wondering what you might change, it's really important to honor what's working well. And I created something called a relationship treasure hunt, which is a way of sort of a guided reflection that's designed to help you identify the hidden gems in your long-term partnership, the emotional and practical and even playful value that accumulates over decades of showing up for each other. And if you're listening and thinking we could use something like that, I'll invite you to try it. I invite you to try it. It's on my website.
All right. I like that a lot. What are some rituals or practices that help couples stay connected during this phase?
One of the simplest but most impactful practices is what I call a marriage meeting. And it's a short, structured weekly check-in where you talk about feelings, appreciation, logistics, plans for fun, money. And it's not therapy, it's more like emotional housekeeping. And I've found I give this to couples towards the end of their course of therapy, and it's kind of like a litmus test for how much are they ready and willing to really start working as a team. And the ones who use it love it and usually graduate from therapy soon thereafter. Another ritual or practice that I think is great is scheduling intimacy. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh my God, that's so boring and pathetic that we have to do this. But when you think about it, when you first met and you knew you were going out on a date with your boyfriend, you knew you were going to have sex that night. So in effect, you did have it scheduled and you put on your best underwear and you took a shower and you did your grooming. So it's really not that different when we're in a long-term relationship. It's just that you're planning for it. And the other thing is that in research about satisfaction in long-term committed couples, the couples who schedule sex or intimacy, whatever that may be, actually have better sex lives. So it really, there's science behind it.
I did not know the science part, but I do think there's pills that people have to skip for a day so that sex is more doable. And I think scheduling is always, the practical part of me has always encouraged scheduling, but I'm glad to know there's science to it too.
Yes, yeah.
How does the way your relationship began, whether it was passionate, practical, complicated, or unconventional, shape how you experience this later stage of your partnership?
Well, this is where those love myths that I talked about earlier can be especially unhelpful. Whether it's the soulmate myth, or that love should be euphoric. Those messages really interfere with your ability to honor what's real. And real love grows slowly, it deepens over time, and it doesn't always look like that story that we thought we were supposed to live. I think that and in particular, I found for many couples, their relationships who started in complexity or ambiguity, and who never really had that falling in love experience the way that the movies promised, they can carry around a sort of a quiet shame and a sense of, did I do this wrong? Did I settle? Did I make a mistake? And that kind of unspoken doubt can really sit like background noise in a long-term partnership. That how it began is actually less important than why you stayed. And, and how you frame that decision. Do you frame it as endurance or as strength, as sacrifice, as loyalty, as shared achievement? The meaning that you give to that really shapes how you're going to feel about your partner today and what you believe is possible in the future.
Or as martyr, or as obligated because of kids. Both of those could really be kind of a negative narrative that would not be a good way to think about it.
Exactly, because I got pregnant, or, in New York City because I couldn't afford the rent in 2 apartments, one of the lots of practical reasons why people did it.
Yeah, or I'm not leaving because I will end up eating ketchup sandwiches. I had a woman that talked about that a lot, and
Exactly.
people kept encouraging her. It was a group therapy thing, and people kept encouraging her, well, talk to a lawyer and get some information. And she just had the ketchup sandwiches in her head, and couldn't move.
I was going to say, and sometimes that concern about ketchup sandwiches is realistic.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, especially for older women who didn't have careers. I always say, you know what? Have some compassion for yourself for making a decision that made sense for you and for you.
Yes, yes. And I also think, though, you need to have the willingness to explore whether or not that's an accurate perception. But how do gendered expectations complicate the second marriage journey?
Well, these expectations play a huge and often invisible role in how couples navigate this stage. For many heterosexual couples, long-standing roles around caregiving and success and emotional labor and even desire can start to feel outdated or even constricting once the structure of raising children or building careers falls away. I think for women, they often arrive at this phase feeling emotionally overextended. They've been the caregivers and the planners and the emotional ATMs for the family. And now they're craving autonomy and self-expression, and they want to be seen again as whole people, not just as wives or mothers or managers of everyone's calendars. Men may tend to feel a different kind of disorientation. They may finally have the desire and the time for deeper connection, but they were never taught how to name that desire. And they've been operating in this patriarchal value system where men produce and consume. And now there's not so much of that anymore. And how do they reach for emotional intimacy without feeling weak or ashamed? They often long to be close, but they're not sure how to get there. And I think another, so these two different expectations often create a kind of a dilemma when one partner wants more space, often the woman, and the other partner wants more closeness, often the man, and both feel misunderstood. And once couples recognize that and are able to start talking about it, they can really co-create new roles that reflect who they are now, not who they were or who they thought they should be.
I would agree. Yeah. Are there any specific considerations for LGBTQ plus couples?
Well, that's a really important question, and I'm so glad you asked it. To be perfectly honest, it's not my area of expertise. I will say that from the few people that I have seen, the few couples and individuals who fall into that category who I have seen, in same-sex and non-traditional partnerships, the dynamics are different, but they're definitely not exempt from them. These couples may not be confined by traditional gender roles, but they still live in a culture that's shaped by them. And internalized beliefs about who should lead, who should nurture, who should initiate intimacy or manage emotions, these can show up in subtle ways, even without binary gender dynamics. So what's powerful about the second marriage concept is that it offers all couples, regardless of gender and identity, a chance to rewrite the rules. And they can step out of inherited roles and into something that's more mutual and conscious and more nourishing for both people.
Yeah, I like that. Please share with my audience what would it look like to build a relationship that feels better than ever at this stage of life, so we know what we're shooting for.
Okay, so it's not about trying to recreate the early days, right? It's about moving into a more mature and evolved phase of intimacy. I really like the model that Ellen Bader and Pete Peterson have created called the developmental model of couple relationships. And they describe how couples move through predictable stages. The first early merging stage is symbiosis, when they want to do everything together and be on the same page about everything. The next phase, where the differences emerge and often lead to conflict, is called differentiation. And then the next phase is exploration, where they have the space to kind of understand who they are as individuals and explore some of their interests. And then ultimately synergy, which is characterized by reconnection and mutual independence. So that final stage is where both people have come into their own, but they're deeply connected. There's emotional honesty really replaces performance and facade. And intimacy becomes less about intensity and more about maybe attunement. You can say what you want without fear. You can disagree without rupture. And you can let go of sort of those old narratives, who's right, who gave more, what didn't happen, and instead start asking, what do we want now? So you laugh more, you're kinder, you rediscover sensuality, not just sexuality. And I think most importantly and profoundly, you get to say, you know what? Whew, we made it through the hard parts. Now let's enjoy each other. We've got wisdom, freedom, emotional bandwidth that we didn't have earlier. So let's have a good time. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Perspective. And yes. And there's an ease. More of an ease is what you're describing, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And it's courage. It takes a lot of courage to really be yourself in a relationship and to trust that the relationship can withstand that and handle it. And that is so valuable and feels so good when you finally get there.
Yeah, it does. What does it mean to think of a relationship as something that develops in phases, or is that what you just described?
That's what I just described, those phases. And these are normal phases.
That's what I thought. That's fine. Where does sex figure into all of this? Is it possible or even realistic to have the kind of sex you have with your partner of 20 plus years as you would with someone new?
Well, sex absolutely figures into this stage of relationship, and not just as a maintenance issue or something to fix, right? In fact, it can be one of the most meaningful and revitalizing parts of your second marriage with each other. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Peggy Kleinplatz. She's a sex researcher in Canada, and she studied people who were self-identified as magnificent lovers. And these were people who are in long-term committed monogamous relationships, both hetero and homosexual relationships. And they were asked, what age do you think you were when your sex life was at its best? And what do you think they answered?
60s.
Yeah, 54 was the common age, 54. And whenever I ask people this question at a dinner party, which people, it's a great, whenever anyone finds out that I'm a sex therapist, they've always got lots of questions. And this is one that I pose to the table. And of course, people say, 18, 25. And when I tell them 54, their jaws drop. But it makes sense, because over time you feel more confident, you feel freer, you're less inhibited, you're more open to communicating your needs and to slow down. And honestly, one of the reasons I think that happens is because you finally got time. to actually
Yes.
have sex without interruptions.
That's true. And the happiest decade, that the reason I said 60s is because the happiest decade, I love to say that at dinner parties, what's the happiest decade? And people all go 30s, 40s, and I'm like, nope, it's the 60s, And I think it would include the 70s if we could be assured of greater physical health. I think that
Yes.
that has the impact in the 70s.
Definitely.
But it
and,
is-
and that has an impact on how you define intimacy.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
there are many ways to have sex that do not involve erections or orgasms or, lots of gymnastics.
Yes, that's right. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to add before we end?
I don't think so. I think that you've asked a lot of really important and great questions, and I've loved having the opportunity to think about these things and talk about them with you.
So please tell my audience where they can reach out to you and what you offer.
Okay, so my website is drhurwitz.com, spelled HERWITZ, Dr. Hurwitz. And on there, you will find a number of different things. You'll find my treasure hunt. You'll find a survey where because I am steeped in research, I'm always interested in hearing from people and what they are experiencing, so you can help me out and all the other couples and give me a little information, and it's all anonymous, and I'm not going to share your info with anybody or sell it anywhere. And I've got some resources for couples. I'm just putting together now a playlist of songs, which has been really fun, about living long lives together and the benefits that come from that. And I'm also working on some putting together some retreats for couples who maybe want to celebrate their accomplishments together and maybe create a vision of what they want. So it's really just, it's a work in progress. It's evolving, like I hope your relationships are. And that's where you can find me.
Okay, great. No matter how long it's been since you felt close, it's never too late to begin again. In fact, there's something powerful about choosing each other now, not out of habit, but out of desire, choicefulness, and love refreshed. Hey, if all else fails, start with dancing in the kitchen. It's hard to stay disconnected when you're having fun in your socks. Thanks for joining us today. My website, therapyideas.net, has over 450 pages of free information.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.